Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special bonus video only episode of The Shallow End. I think it's my first bonus episode. I just felt like hopping on and talking about a few cards, and not just any cards. The cards that I'm talking about today are the three most valuable cards in my collection. I've seen these videos done before, usually at the end of a year, like at the end of 2024. It's like my 50 most valuable cards or whatever it happens to be. So, I'm going to try one of these types of videos. If you don't know me, thank you for joining. My name is Dave Schwartz. On Instagram, I'm Iowa Dave Sports Cards. That's Iowa _ Dave _ Sports Cards. So, yeah, I wanted to get in on some of the fun. My hope is that I don't make anybody jealous with these three cards because no matter what you offer for them, they're not for sale. They are so valuable that I don't think any of you can afford them. And I don't think I could ever reacquire them. So I know I usually try not to boast about the value of my collection, but these three, they're just sort of above and beyond everything else. So let me just get to it and talk about my three most valuable cards. Number one, the most probably tied for number one of my most valuable cards is this. It's a 1957 Topps Red Shandies. It's raw. It's raw because I don't think any grading company could handle the power of this card. So let me tell you the story behind it. This was my father's card. My father died when I was 4 years old. About 6 or 7 years later, I was about 10, 11 years old. At this point, I was just deep, deep, deep into the card hobby. I loved it so much. Really got involved in around 83 to about 91. Those were my years as a kid. But 10, 11 years old, my mom decides that she wants me to have this card of my dad's. And I knew he was a sports fan. I didn't really understand if he collected anything at all. I never really thought about it much. And she handed me a stack of about 4 or 5 1957 Topps cards. I didn't really recognize any of the players. I think Hoyt Wilhelm might have been in there. At that point, I really wasn't sure who he was, plus 3 or 4 commons. But this guy, Red Shandies, I knew who he was because I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, where Red Shandies spent about 13 or 14 decades as a member of the Cardinals organization. And this card threw me off a little bit because he's wearing a New York Giants outfit uniform. I thought it was just absolutely cool as heck because, for one thing, I was aware the Giants were the San Francisco Giants, but I had never really been able to visualize them being in New York. And of course, even at that young age, I was uh, almost idolized Willie Mays and I knew Willie McCovey and all those folks, but I never really thought of them as being New York. I thought of them as being just San Francisco. And so I held this card. I can remember looking at it from time to time and just being sort of mesmerized by it because it was my dad's. And not really knowing him, I have maybe 2 or 3 very, very quick flashes of memories of him. Like I said, I was just barely 4 at the time of his death. This was sort of like the one real connection I sort of felt with him in a way. And, a little while back, I thought, oh, I should have this graded and preserve it. But then I thought, no, why would I want to do that? Because when I take it out of the holder, right, when I take it out of the holder, like I'm going to do right now, and if I were to take it all the way out of the penny sleeve, I'm holding the same piece of cardboard, at least at the top, that he held, which is kind of neat. I don't know if there are many other things in this world that have that sort of connection. One thing that's really interesting about this card is the 57 set is, as you vintage collectors know more than I do, is notoriously often off center. And this one is actually pretty good, right, in terms of centering. So that's really neat. I don't know if my dad had a really good eye for it or if it just kind of got lucky and he held on to it. But Red Shandies, Cardinal icon, Cardinal hero, New York Giants uniform here. But he was the name I recognized, and I honestly don't remember what happened to the other cards. to the Wilhelm to the other commons. But this one, I think, must have just been because it was Shandy's. I held on to in some special way, and there we go. That's it. Number two here, we have a 1972 Topps Bob Gibson. And if I were to get this one graded, it might get a 1.5. I'm not sure. It's hard to say. Here's the back. And if I look at the front, the corners are damaged, just off center. There's a crease in the top left, all sorts of things here. Now, I have told the story of this card before on my audio podcast, but I think the last time I did that was 2023. So it's been a couple of years. And here's the story behind the card. So after my dad died, about a couple years later, my mom remarried to a wonderful man who became like my dad and raised me, which is great. But he wasn't much of a sports fan. No problem. Great father. My mom, however, was a huge, huge sports fan. She loved the Cardinals, both Cardinals, the football Cardinals in St. Louis before they moved to Arizona, and the baseball Cardinals. She was such a diehard sports fan that when I became aware of sports and I was going to start cheering for local teams in St. Louis, she purposely went and got me an Oakland Raiders hoodie because she had been heartbroken so many times by the Bidwell family and the St. Louis football Cardinals that she didn't want me going through that same sort of trauma, sports trauma, right? Which is really funny. So she was really engaged in thinking about sports. And to this day, I'm a Raiders fan and thankfully not a football Cardinals fan. Okay. As I got older and started thinking about what she could possibly want or possibly need for birthdays, for holidays, for whatever, we started running out of things. She kind of really didn't need a whole lot. And so around Christmas of 2004, my wife and I decided to get her this 1972 Topps Bob Gibson, because Bob Gibson was her favorite player. When I first got back into the hobby, one of the cards I pushed for the most and worked toward after about a year or two was a 59 Topps Bob Gibson rookie. And that's because that was her favorite player. And I thought it'd be cool to own the card. But this one cost maybe $3 or $4 plus probably more in shipping off eBay. And this was an 04. And I consider myself lucky the card even got there because in eBay, it was the Wild West at that point. So in 04, we got her this and she loved it. My wife and I got her this card. She loved it, loved it, loved it. So she had been off and on sick for a while at that point. About 6 months later, around May of 05, she died. It was sudden, but not a surprise. So went home, did the funeral stuff, came back, went back home, and then decided to go back to St. Louis again to help my dad sort of pack up and clean up her stuff, right? And as I'm kind of going through her books and some other stuff, I am standing in front of her bedroom mirror where she got dressed every morning and got dressed and checked her outfit and her hair and whatever else. And what do I see in the corner of the mirror tucked in, but this card? I see this. And push this out as well. Maybe you can see it a little bit better without a glare, but there it is. And there's this card just tucked in. I love the feeling that A, she enjoyed the card, but B, the last real gift that we got her was something that had a lot of meaning for her. And so I grabbed it. I grabbed it from the mirror and brought it home, and I've had it here ever since. And just like the 57 Red Shandy's, a couple times I thought I should get this graded and keep it protected so that, a million years from now, when I take out and look for it, no damage can theoretically be done for it. And I think that's really silly. What more damage could be done to this card? If this card got folded in half and then run over by a steamroller, I really wouldn't care that much. And I like holding it, and because she also enjoyed it as well. And so you have this pair of cards right here So these are the first two of the three cards that are most valuable to me in my collection. Love them. So this one I've checked, I can probably get one off eBay for about $3, and this one about the same. The last one is different. It is modern. It's not ultra modern, I guess, if you want to get into that debate, but it's modern. It's a little bit different. And this last card is a 2005 Donruss Studio proof of one of my favorite Cardinals of all time. And it's numbered out of 10. It is a Rick Ankiel card. Okay. So Rick Ankiel, numbered out of 10. There's the number at the bottom. Sorry, I almost ate the microphone there. Sorry if I got too loud. There it is. So what is it about this card? I have other Rick Ankiel cards. He is one of the most inspiring athletes of my lifetime. If you remember, sometime around 01, 02, he got the yips in the playoffs against the Braves. He's a lefty. He threw so hard. Great pitcher. He was like one of the guys to collect around 2000, 99, 2000, 2001, until he got the yips. There's two things about this card I really like. The first one reminds me of how even in your darkest moments, there's always going to be a light. And sometimes you have to dig your way through the tunnel and create your own light. So here's what it says on the back of this card. And from what I can tell, this is one of the few cards that acknowledges his transition from pitcher to hitter. And it says, Ankiel announced his decision to retire from pitching and pursue a career as an outfielder during spring training in 2005. He struck out 269 batters in 242 innings with St. Louis, going 13-10 with a 3.90 ERA. He led Cardinals pitchers with 2 homers and 9 RBIs in 2000. So I won't make you read the whole thing yourself, but you can see that it's there. And as far as pictures go, at least in the foreground, there's nothing all that interesting. He's just kind of just standing there. And I doubt this picture was taken in 2004, 2005, because this was at the height of his struggles. And I'm not even sure he was around the team that much. So this might have been a file photo or some sort of a stock photo that Donruss had of him. So I mentioned there were two things about this card that I liked. The first one I mentioned was how it talks about how he's going to try to rebuild himself, which he does. He comes back a couple of years later and becomes a hitter. He becomes an outfielder with, not surprisingly, a cannon for an arm. And if you are ever able to or feel like going to YouTube and just looking up him throwing out runners at home or third base from the outfield, it's insane. So he never pitched again, but he became a really good fielder and he could hit a little bit. And at one point he hits 25 plus homers in a season, and he joins Babe Ruth as the only players in baseball history to hit 25 homers in a season and start a certain number of games as a pitcher as well. And later on, about a decade later, Ohtani became the third, but that's a great trivia question. It's Babe Ruth, Shohei Ohtani, and Rick Ankiel are the only 3 players to have 25 homers in a season and a certain number, I think it's like 10 starts in a season or something like that. It's crazy. It's fantastic. So let me tell you about the other reason I like this card. I've got about 4 other Rick Ankiel cards. None of them are really, no Rick Ankiel cards really cost that much, except maybe a Superfractor. Anyway, I'm scrolling, as one does, through eBay, looking for Rick Ankiel cards. And at first, this one catches my attention because it's out of 10. I'm like, oh, that's neat. But it's a Donruss, studio proof. Like, whatever. I don't care that much about the set. I don't care if it is only numbered to 10. And then something else about this card captures my attention. It's not what is happening in the front of the card where he is, just sort of pulling a Paul pack for the purpose of this picture. It's not the studio proof logo down here by my index finger. It's in the background. And I'm floored when I recognize it. It's over here. It's 2 buildings here. And if you see those two buildings, especially one that's a little bit taller, I know that building. I know that building very well. I have a lot of memories of that building. And I realized that building, which, of course, it's on the St. Louis side of the Mississippi River in St. Louis, and it looks toward the arch and it looks toward Illinois. Our neighbor, when I was growing up, our neighbor worked in an advertising firm that was based in that building. And every 4th of July, probably 10 straight years as I was growing up, we would go to his building where he worked at that advertising complex. And he had a balcony. Their firm had a balcony where you would go out and you could look straight at the arch. And you were maybe, I don't know, 14, 15, 20 floors up, however high up you were. You're pretty high up. I'm going to guess 20 floors. And you could watch the fireworks. Today it's called Fair St. Louis, but growing up it was called the VP Fair, which stands for Veiled Prophet Fair. Don't worry about it. You look it up if you want. But I would always bring a friend, and I'd always be there with maybe my brother, maybe my sister, family friends, my parents. And we would always go and just be food and friends and family watching fireworks under the arch, going up above the arch. That were the most spectacular things that you've ever seen. The first concert I ever saw was at that fair because they would always have musical acts as the sun was going down before it was time for the fireworks. And the first concert I ever saw, I was very lucky. The opening act was Anita Baker, and the headliner was James Brown, like the James Brown. It was incredible, right? So I'm looking at this card, and I think I've got to get this card. It's got the building with all the memories in it. And to make it even better, it's got one of my favorite Cardinals on there, and Rick Ankiel. They were asking $28 for the card. That seemed like a bit much. Usually I try not to offer more than 15%, 20% below asking price. That seemed really high. I offered $15. The person countered at 20, and I thought, if I lose this card, I would be really bummed. So I just accepted it. It came, about a week ago or so. So there it is again, Rick Ankiel, the fun buildings in the background, the great story on the back. And it joins the 57 Red Shandies and the 71 Bob Gibson as the most valuable cards in my collection. So sorry, everyone. I'm not selling these. Well, I probably would for the right price. But I have a feeling these are going to be sticking in my collection for the next, who knows, 50 to 100 years. So thanks for tuning in to this bonus episode of The Shallow End. I appreciate it. It was great talking with you, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.